orbit, about 200 miles up in the sky. Right now, there are about 3,300 satellites up there, and there's at least one or two in sight overhead at any time. The dish there will just automatically connect to whatever satellite's available. When it starts to go over the horizon, it'll find the next one and connect. You don't have to do a thing. It handles it automatically. In fact, when you first turn the power up Starlink, the dish, it has motors in it. It will aim itself. It's really cool to watch. If you see, there are videos out there on the internet on it. I know I've posted one. It's a sign we're living in the future. It's pretty cool. So because Starlink connects directly to the satellites, cellular services are irrelevant. You don't need to have a cell signal to use Starlink. It's a separate network, and as long as you've got a clear view of the sky, of the north sky in particular, you can typically get online. But if your phone, and most phones these days do that, support Wi-Fi calling, in other words, you're able to get your phone calls or send text messages over a Wi-Fi network, then your phone will actually work when it's connected through Starlink. You'll still be able to get phone calls out in the middle of nowhere when you have no cell service. So that's pretty cool too. I have had it since June, and I can tell you it's been a total game changer for me. There have been times when I've had to choose where I camp based on where I have cell service. I have had to make an emergency run into town to go stay in a Cabela's parking lot for a meeting the next morning when suddenly my cell service at the previous evening just stopped working. So I had to run away and do that. With Starlink, I'm able to go out in the middle of nowhere, power it up, it'll connect, and I'm online. I'm able to go places and camp places that I wouldn't have been able to before. So Starlink's your option for maximum flexibility in where you can go and where you can use it. So it's not all sunshine and rainbows. The biggest downside of Starlink is the price. It is not cheap. The equipment, which includes the dish you see over there, and a router, just like you have for a home Wi-Fi network, and the cable to hook them all together, that costs $599. And the service itself will run you $135. So not a cheap solution, but if you're making money doing remote work, it could be worth it to you. I find it's definitely worth it to me just to have the freedom and the ability to work from anywhere. I see a question over there.
Yeah, what if I form a co-op and get a big router connected to that Starlink and my friends use it?
The question is, what if I get a big co-op, bunch of friends together, connect it to Starlink and your friends use it? You can do that. It will support multiple connections. The only issue is, are you going to slow yourself down with too many people wanting internet? But yes, some friends of mine in my camp do share my setup when I'm there.
How fast is it?
Great question. I will skip right to that. Let's see. Actually, that's the next thing I was going to talk about anyway, so you let me right into it. There are basically two different plans that you can use for mobile Starlink. Both of them, in the end, cost $135. So it's kind of the same thing. Let's see. Per month, yes. So $5.99 to start, $135 a month. The two plans are basically, there's residential with the portability option turned on. That's what you would get if you live in a sticks and bricks, at least part-time, and want to take it with you on the road occasionally, but then go back home again. The other option is an RV-only plan, which they intend, if you already have an internet connection at home, a cable modem or something like that, and you only use Starlink on the road, you can take that with you. And what that really does is it gives you the ability to turn your Starlink subscription on and off almost any time you want. You don't have that option with a residential plan. The advantage you get with a residential plan is when you are at your home address, you get faster speeds. When you're traveling, Starlink promises 5 to 50 megabits per second down from the satellite, which is what you use most, and 2 to 10 megabits per second up. Now, that's just what they promise. Back here in a quartzsite in October, when very few people were here, I was getting 132 megabits per second on a speed test. It was super fast. The other night, when one of the few times my videos were buffering, I saw 1 megabit per second. It's getting pretty loaded down here, but it's still usable. I've had many nights with no buffering, only occasionally during prime time, like in the evening, wasn't actually having any problems, and it still worked better than any cell service out here. Let's see. Some other things to keep in mind about Starlink is, like I say, you must have a clear view of the north sky. That's where the dish is going to aim itself. So if you're in the middle of a forest surrounded by trees, you got the canopy overhead, you can't use Starlink. It's not going to connect. I've seen a lot of people on the Facebook groups about it, talking about how terrible it is, how it doesn't work, and they're set up in an RV park with their dish pointed straight at a big tree. So what do you expect? You need to have the line of sight between your dish and the satellite in order to connect to it. And if there's something blocking it, you're not going to be able to connect. So don't throw your hotspots away. I used my hotspots again when I was staying up in the National Forest by the Grand Canyon a few months ago. And I had good internet through the hotspots because I was really close to a town. I just couldn't use Starlink. The other nice thing about having both Starlink and your hotspots is you have limited data on your hotspots, but Starlink is truly unlimited. So if you have that as your unlimited outlet and that's your primary connection, you've got your full monthly data available for those few times when you can't use Starlink. So you don't have to be quite as frugal on how much data you use. You don't have to think to yourself, oh, can I watch videos tonight? Am I going to run out of data so I can't work at the end of the month? No, there's none of that stress, really. And that doesn't mean you can't be in a forest either. You only need a view of the north sky. In Sisters, Oregon, I literally parked right next to a tree to get a little bit of shade. The tree was to the south of my van. The dish pointed itself north, and I had no trouble getting online. So you just have to be a little picky about where you park. Make sure you've got that view to the north, and you're okay. So you can still make it work in a forest if you can find a clearing to the north like I did up in Sisters. That worked pretty well. Besides the cost of Starlink, the biggest disadvantage is its power consumption. For one thing, it will only run on 110 volts AC. There isn't a easy way to run it off of 12 volts. There are some people, you can use a Jackery or some other power station. There is no easy way to run it off of 12 volts. There are some people who have hacked their own way to do it. I'm not going to cut open my dish and make that work. But you do need to have an inverter in order to run Starlink. I see a question right there.
Yeah, this was based on the visibility again. How about clouds and weather?
Clouds and weather, good question. I personally haven't run into very much trouble with it. Clouds haven't affected it. Through that nasty rainstorm we had a couple of nights ago, mine still worked just fine. I turned it off, or I stopped watching my video because I literally couldn't hear it over the sound of the rain on my roof. But getting the video wasn't a problem. Now there are some people who say they have had issues related to weather. That may be valid. I personally have not. So.
Question?
Okay.
You didn't mention if the two Starlink plans are priced differently.
They are not priced differently. The RV plan is $135 a month. Residential alone is 110, but then in order to use it away from home, you need to add a $25 a month portability option, which brings the cost up to $135 again. Which one of those is best for your needs is actually pretty complicated. Depends on your situation, and it's kind of counterintuitive. There are plenty of people who get the residential plan even though they're full-time on the road, and what they do is they simply change their residential address to be where they happen to be camping right now. If I change my residential address to Quartzsite, Arizona, I could get some faster speeds, but then you have to worry about whether you're gonna be able to get back into your home spot again, because some cells, I'm getting a little too complicated here. There are some areas where Starlink isn't accepting any more customers. They are at capacity.
Really?
So if you have your home there, you may not be able to get it in the first place. Where I went with the RV plan because I may come off the road from time to time, and I didn't have to specify a home address. So I had to specify an address for them to mail it to, but that's it. So I can always get online, even in cells that are full, technically. Back to the power requirements. So let's talk about the actual power consumption. The Starlink website says that it draws 100 watts. The truth from my experience is yes. Right when it's first starting up, it will draw 100 watts briefly, but once it connects and figures out what it's doing, it'll pull anywhere from 30 to 50 watts, which is better than 100, but it's a whole lot more than the 5 watts it takes to charge your cell phone or your hotspot. That's, if it's taking 50 watts to run Starlink, that's 10 times as much power draw on your system than charging your phone, and that is significant. Let's say you're doing an 8-hour workday online at 50 watts per hour, so you're using 400 watt hours of electricity, which translates, when you divide it by the 12 volts going through your inverter, that's 33 amp hours of your battery you're using just for an 8-hour workday. So that is about a third of your entire 100 amp hour lithium battery. If you have an AGM battery, 100 amp hours, that is 2/3 of your usable capacity, because you can only run an AGM down to 50%. So definitely have to consider your electrical system, and if necessary, upgrade it to handle Starlink. That's what I had to do. I had AGM batteries before, and I was always worried about draining them too much. And eventually I switched to lithium batteries to improve my capacity, and I added an additional solar panel to my system so I could charge it more quickly. And now I'm doing okay. I think I have found the right balance for me, but that is definitely a big issue and consideration there. There are some good ways to save power with Starlink. One is to turn it on only when you are actively using it. If you turn it off, it's not using power. And in the Starlink app, there is a feature where you can go and turn off the heating element. The dish actually has a heater built into it so that on a cold morning, it will melt ice and snow off of the dish for you. There's also a picture on the internet you can find where cats really enjoy snuggling up on top of the dish because it's warm. Go look it up. It's pretty funny. But that does take a lot of electricity too. So I plan to never camp anywhere I'm gonna have to melt snow off my dish, so I just turn that right off. I see a question over there.
Yeah, I had a question about cell boost. So we have WeBoost and Hot